The whisper started long before the scream. It was a serpent of a sound, coiling in the silence between heartbeats, a venomous promise of failure. You know the one. It's the voice that tells you the dream is too big, the wall is too high, that you are not enough. It's the ghost that haunts the space between who you are and who you were meant to be. But what if I told you that voice isn't your enemy? What if it's a key? What if the deepest shadows of your doubt are not a tomb, but a forge? And what if the only thing required to turn that poison into power, that fear into fuel, is a discipline so severe, so absolute, that it burns away everything you thought you were, leaving only the weapon you were born to be? Stay with me, and I will show you how to build that forge, how to hammer your own soul on the anvil of your darkest nights. I will show you the Guardian's resolve. The city of Veridia was built on stories. Kalen knew them all. As second archivist of the great library, he was a custodian of legends, a shepherd of whispered histories and heroic sagas written in ink that had long outlasted the blood of the men who'd inspired them. His world was parchment and dust, the silent weight of ages pressing down on him in the cavernous halls of knowledge. He was safe there. He was small there. He lived through the courage of others, his heart beating in time with warriors and kings who had been dead for 1,000 years. His hands, stained with the soot of ancient scrolls, had never held a sword. His voice, practiced in the quiet recitation of forgotten lore, had never given a command. He was a shadow in a world of blazing suns, a footnote in the grand narrative he so meticulously preserved. And he believed, with the quiet certainty of a man who has never been tested, that this was enough. The first tremor was a lie, a gentle shudder that ran through the marble floors of the library, dismissed by the senior archivist as the settling of old foundations. But Kalen felt it differently. It was not the groan of stone, but the clearing of a throat, a presence announcing itself. For a week, he felt it in the marrow of his bones, a low hum of wrongness that the city, in its arrogant slumber, chose to ignore. He tried to speak of it once to his superior, a man whose spine had been bent into a permanent question mark by decades of leaning over texts. The senior archivist had simply waved a dismissive hand, his focus on a fraying tapestry depicting the first king's coronation. "The world outside is noise, Kalen," the old man had murmured. "The truth is here, in the silence. Do not be distracted by the fleeting anxieties of the physical realm." It was the foundational lie they all told themselves, that the walls of the library were not just stone, but a metaphysical barrier against the chaos of the world. That knowledge was a shield. That to understand a thing was to have power over it. It was a lie that would cost them everything. Do you have such a library in your own mind? A place you retreat to, filled with the stories of what you could do, what you might do, what others have done. A place where you are the curator of your own potential, but never the author of its execution. You read the books, you watch the videos, you gather the knowledge. You understand the theory of courage, the philosophy of discipline, the mechanics of success. But your hands remain clean. Your voice remains quiet. And the world outside, the real world, the one that doesn't care about your understanding, is beginning to shake. You feel it, don't you? That low hum of wrongness. That sense that the foundations of your quiet life are about to give way. You dismiss it as anxiety. You call it overthinking. You are told, by others and by yourself, that the truth is in the silence, in the planning, in the waiting. You are being told a lie. The scream, when it finally came, was not from a single throat. It was the sound of the city itself being torn open. Kalen was in the scriptorium, meticulously restoring a crumbling map of the outer territories when the world ended. The marble floors didn't just tremble, they split. The soaring stained glass windows, depicting stoic scholars and serene philosophers, exploded inward in a technicolor storm of razor-sharp shards. The scream was a chorus of thousands, a single, unified note of terror that ripped through the sacred silence of the library and shredded it to nothing. The noise the senior archivist had warned him against had arrived, and it was hungry. Kalen was thrown from his stool, the delicate map, his life's work, turning to meaningless confetti around him. The air, once thick with the scent of aging paper and beeswax, was now choked with the metallic tang of fear and something else, something ancient and predatory. From the shattered windows, things began to crawl. They were not creatures of any known legend, not of any text Kalen had ever studied. They were embodiments of shadow, things of chitin and wrong angles, their forms shifting as if reality itself couldn't quite decide what they were. They moved with a liquid, unnatural speed, and the sounds they made were like tearing fabric, like grinding bone. The scholars and archivists, men of intellect and theory, screamed. They ran. They threw priceless tomes, their only weapons, and the books fell with pathetic, dusty thuds against the creatures' glistening hides. The senior archivist, the man of silence and truth, was gone in a moment, his question-mark spine straightened into a final, horrific exclamation point by a creature that seemed to be made of living smoke and broken glass. Kalen didn't run, he couldn't. He was paralyzed not by fear but by a sudden, soul-crushing revelation. In a life spent memorizing the deeds of heroes, he had never once considered what he himself would do when the monsters came. He had all the knowledge in the world, the collected wisdom of his civilization, and it was useless. The stories were just ink. The philosophies were just words. The silence was a lie, and the truth was this. In the face of chaos, a man is not what he thinks or what he knows. He is what he does. And Kalen was doing nothing. He was a statue of useless knowledge, a monument to inaction. One of the shadow things turned its attention to him. It had no face, only a swirling vortex of energy where one should be, a void that promised annihilation. It skittered towards him, its claws clicking on the fractured marble. This was it. The end of the footnote. The final, unread page. This is the moment of truth that life eventually sends for every single one of us. It may not be a monster of shadow and claw. It may be the loss of a job, the betrayal of a friend, the diagnosis from a doctor, the reflection in the mirror that you no longer recognize. It is the moment the walls of your library come crashing down. The moment all your theories, all your plans, all your carefully curated knowledge proves to be nothing more than dust in the face of a brutal, unforgiving reality. What do you do in that moment? When the carefully constructed narrative of your life is ripped to shreds, what action do you take? Do you freeze? Do you become a statue of your own potential, waiting for an ending you did not write? Or do you find something else inside you, something you didn't know you had, something that has been waiting in the dark, silent and patient, for the utter ruin of the man you thought you were? As the creature lunged, something inside Kalen broke. Not his courage, for he had none. Not his will, for it was untested. It was the cage that broke. The cage of theory, of observation, of a life lived second-hand. And in its place a single primal instinct flared to life, survive. He didn't think, he acted. He grabbed the one thing within reach that was not a book, a heavy iron map-weight from his desk, a solid sphere of polished metal. It was clumsy, it was pathetic, but it was real. He swung. The impact was jarring, a shock that ran up his arm and into his soul. He had never struck anything in anger or defense in his entire life. The creature recoiled with a sound like a shriek of tortured metal, the vortex of its face flickering. It was surprised. It had expected prey, not resistance. For the first time in his life, Kalen was not a story. He was a sentence being written in real time. And that sentence was, "I will not die here." He scrambled back, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. The creature came again, faster this time. He was no warrior. He had no skill, no training. All he had was the raw, desperate energy of a man with nothing left to lose. He fled. He ran through the desecrated halls of his former life, past the bodies of his colleagues, past the smoldering remains of 1,000 years of wisdom. He ran until his lungs burned and his legs screamed, the clicking of the creature's claws a relentless echo behind him. He burst out of the library's main doors and into a city consumed by fire and madness. The sky was a bruised purple, choked with smoke. The shadow things were everywhere, pouring from a shimmering, tear-like fissure that hung in the air above the central plaza, the breach. The city guard, the proud, disciplined soldiers whose exploits filled half the books in the library, were being slaughtered. Their steel was useless against these ethereal horrors. Veridia was not just falling, it was being erased. Kalen found himself backed into a narrow alley, the creature from the scriptorium blocking his only escape. It closed in, its form solidifying, its intent a palpable wave of malice. He was trapped. The map weight felt impossibly heavy now, a child's toy against an apocalypse. He closed his eyes, the final, pathetic surrender. He had written one sentence. It was not enough. Then a new sound cut through the chaos, a calm, measured voice. "Open your eyes." Kalen's eyes snapped open. Standing between him and the creature was a man. He was old, but he stood with the solidity of a mountain. He wore the simple gray robes of a stonemason, and in his hand he held not a sword but a simple wooden staff. He wasn't looking at the creature. He was looking at Kalen. His eyes were the color of a winter sky, and they held no fear, no panic, only a terrifying, absolute calm. "The fear you feel," the old man said, his voice a low rumble that was somehow not lost in the din of the dying city. "Is it the creature you fear, or is it the man you have been until this moment?" The question was so absurd, so insane in its context, that it shocked Kalen's mind into a moment of perfect clarity. The creature hesitated, as if confused by the utter lack of fear from its new target. "Answer me, archivist," the old man commanded, his gaze pinning Kalen to the wall. I don't know," Kalen stammered. "Then you have already lost," the old man said. He did not move. He simply watched Kalen, his presence a challenge. "It does not matter what stands before you. It only matters who stands within you. Who are you in this moment?" The creature, its patience gone, lunged at the old man. Kalen expected a flash of light, a secret power, some magic to match the unholy nature of the beast. But there was none. The old man moved with an economy of motion that was breathtaking. He didn't block the creature's attack. He simply wasn't there when it landed. He shifted his weight, a subtle pivot of his heel on the blood-slicked cobblestones, and the creature's claws scraped harmlessly against the brick wall. As it passed, the old man brought his simple staff around in a short, brutal arc. It connected with the creature's side, and for the first time the thing made a sound of true pain. It was not the sound of magic, but the simple, unassailable physics of force applied with perfect timing and precision. The monster was a whirlwind of rage, a storm of claws and shadows. The old man was the stone in the middle of the river, unmoving, letting the chaos break against him. He never took his eyes off Kalen. "You have spent your life reading the stories of others," he said, sidestepping another lethal strike. "Their discipline, their resolve, you admired it. You cataloged it, but you never understood it. Discipline is not a story to be read. It is a fire that must be walked through." With a final, precise strike to a joint Kalen couldn't even see, the old man shattered the creature's leg. It collapsed, writhing and shrieking. He stepped over it, his wooden staff resting on his shoulder, and stood before Kalen. The city burned around them. The screams of the dying were their symphony. But in the old man's gaze there was an unnerving peace. "The city is dead," the old man said, his voice devoid of emotion. "The library is ash. The man you were is a ghost. This is a gift." "A gift," Kalen choked out, gesturing to the apocalypse around them. "This is hell." "They are often the same thing," the old man replied. "Hell is the fire that burns away the lies. What is left, if you can endure it, is the truth. My name is Silas, and your education is about to begin. You will learn that the shadows you see in the world are nothing compared to the ones you carry within you, and you will learn to forge them into a weapon. This is the second great truth. Your life as you know it must end. The identity you cling to, the comfortable routines, the safe lies you've built your world upon, they are a cage. And the universe, in its infinite and often brutal wisdom, will one day send the fire to burn that cage down. You can curse the fire. You can scream at the injustice of the flames, or you can see it for the gift that it is. The chance to be reborn from the ashes, not as you were, but as you were always meant to be. Every true transformation is preceded by utter destruction. You cannot build a fortress on the foundations of a shack. You must clear the ground. Have you been cleared? Has life burned you to the bedrock? Good. The real work can now begin. Silas looked at the trembling archivist, a boy playing a man's part, and saw not what was, but what could be. He saw the flicker of defiance in the library, the desperate swing of the map weight. It was a tiny spark in a universe of darkness, but a spark was all he needed. The first lesson is this, Silas said, his voice cutting through Kalen's shock. What you are feeling right now, the terror, the grief, the helplessness, is a choice. It feels like a storm, an overwhelming force of nature, but it is not. It is a narrative you are telling yourself, and any narrative can be rewritten. Kalen stared at him, incredulous. A choice? My home is gone, everyone I knew is dead. This isn't a story, it's reality. No, Silas corrected, his gaze unwavering. The events are reality. The city has fallen, people have died. These are facts as neutral as a stone falling to the earth. Your suffering, however, comes not from the facts but from your judgment of them. You have judged them to be terrible, unbearable, the end. Your judgment is the poison, not the event. This is the cornerstone of the Guardian's resolve. It is the first seal that must be broken on the path to unshakable strength. The absolute separation of event and judgment. We do not suffer from what happens to us. We suffer from what we tell ourselves about what happens to us. Think about it. The job you lost was not in itself the source of your pain. It was the story you attached to it. I am a failure. I am worthless. My future is ruined. The rejection you faced was not the wound. It was the narrative that followed. I am unlovable. I will always be alone. These are stories, and you are the author. The Stoics of old knew this. They called it the dichotomy of control. There are things you can control and things you cannot. You cannot control the storm, but you can control the set of your sail. You cannot control the actions of others, but you can control your response. This isn't a passive acceptance of fate. It is the ultimate seizure of power. It is the declaration that your inner world, your peace, your resolve, will not be held hostage by the chaos of the outer world. Silas gestured with his staff toward the breach, the shimmering wound in the sky from which the horrors continued to spill. Look at that. What do you see? I see an end, Kalen whispered. An invasion, a force we cannot fight. I see a gate, Silas said. I see a crucible, I see an opportunity. We see the same thing, archivist. We have simply chosen to write a different story about it. Your story has made you weak. Mine has made me ready. Which story is more useful? He didn't wait for an answer. He began to walk deeper into the ruined city, away from the perceived safety of the alleys and toward the heart of the chaos. Kalen had a choice. Stay and be consumed by the monsters or follow the madman into the fire. He looked at the smoking ruins of the library, the tomb of his former self. The man who lived there was dead. He had died the moment he swung that map weight. Hesitantly, like a newborn foal taking its first steps, he followed Silas. Their journey through the city was a lesson in itself. Silas moved with a purpose that defied the pandemonium around them. He did not fight when he could avoid it, his path a fluid line through the pockets of least resistance. But when fighting was unavoidable, he did so with a terrifying efficiency. He met the unholy energy of the shadow creatures not with equal fury, but with a grounded, calm precision. Every movement was deliberate. Every strike of his staff was final. Kalen saw that Silas wasn't fighting the creatures. He was solving a problem. The problem was an obstacle between him and his objective. There was no anger, no hatred, no fear. There was only the problem and the solution. Lesson 2, Silas said, after dispatching a trio of smaller, skittering things without breaking his stride. Your energy is your most precious resource. It is the fuel for your will. Do not waste it on pointless emotions. Fear is a tax on your strength you pay for a danger that may not even come. Anger is a fire that burns you more than your enemy. Hatred is a poison you drink hoping the other person will die. These are luxuries you cannot afford. A guardian acts not from passion but from purpose. What is your purpose right now, archivist? To survive, Kalen said immediately. Pathetic, Silas spat, though his voice remained level. Survival is the goal of an animal. It is a reaction, not a purpose. Purpose is a choice. It is the destination you set on your map. Survival is simply not dying on the way there. I will ask again, what is your purpose? Kalen struggled for an answer. What was his purpose? He had never had one beyond cataloging the purposes of others. He was a vessel, not a source. I don't have one. Then we will find you one, Silas said. We go to the sunken temple. There we may find a way to seal the breach. Just like that, he had given Kalen a purpose, a destination, and with it a strange thing happened. The chaos of the city seemed to reorient itself. It was no longer a meaningless horror. It was now a series of obstacles between him and the sunken temple. His fear did not vanish, but it now had a context. It was no longer a paralyzing fog, but a specific, identifiable risk to the new mission. This is the power of a defined purpose. Without a clear objective, all hardship is just suffering. With a clear objective, hardship becomes the path. It becomes the training. It becomes the rite of passage. What is your sunken temple? What is the grand, audacious, seemingly impossible goal that you are aiming for? If you don't have one, it's no wonder you feel lost. It's no wonder you are at the mercy of every passing emotion and circumstance. Your ship is adrift with no rudder and no destination, tossed about by every wave. You must define your purpose. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be your final purpose, but you must choose a direction. Write it down. Say it out loud. My purpose is to build my own business. My purpose is to achieve physical mastery of my body. My purpose is to become a man of unshakable integrity. The moment you define it, the world shifts. The random struggles of your life now become challenges to be overcome in service of that purpose. The pain gains meaning. And a man with a meaningful reason to suffer can bear almost any suffering. Their path led them to the old aqueduct system, a labyrinth of tunnels beneath the city. It was dark, claustrophobic, and filled with the dripping sound of water and the distant, unsettling chittering of unseen things. For Kalen, who had spent his life in the vast, open halls of the library, this was a new kind of hell. The darkness was absolute, a physical presence that pressed in on him. I can't see, Kalen whispered, his hand trailing against the slimy stone wall. Another choice, came Silas's voice from the darkness ahead. You are choosing to rely on your weakest sense in this environment. You have others. What do you hear? What do you feel through the soles of your feet? What does the air smell of? Your focus on what you have lost, your sight, has blinded you to the tools you still possess. Kalen stopped, forcing himself to breathe. He closed his eyes, which was pointless in the pitch black, but it felt like a conscious act of surrender. He focused. He could hear the drip of water, yes, but beneath it, a faint, rhythmic scraping sound. To the left, far ahead. He could feel the vibrations through the stone floor, a slight tremor that did not match his own footsteps or Silas's. And the air. It smelled of moss and damp earth, but also of that same metallic, predatory scent from the library. They were not alone. This is the discipline of perception. Most of us stumble through life half-blind, our senses dulled by constant distraction and our focus locked on what we lack. We lament our lack of money, so we fail to see the opportunities for resourcefulness around us. We bemoan our lack of connections, so we fail to cultivate the relationships we already have. We fixate on the one sense that is failing us and ignore the four that are still functional. The Guardian's resolve demands that you become a master of your own perception. You must train yourself to shut out the noise and truly observe. What is the subtext of the conversation you're in? What is the body language of the person across from you telling you? What is the subtle opportunity hidden within the crisis you are facing? You must learn to see the world as it is, not as you wish it were or fear it might be. And that begins by using every tool at your disposal, especially the ones you have forgotten you have. They are ahead, Kalen said, his voice a little steadier. Two of them, stationed in a side chamber to the left. There was a long silence. Then from the darkness, Silas's voice came with the barest hint of something that might have been approval. Good. Your education continues. Now we will introduce you to another teacher. Her name is Pain. Before Kalen could ask what he meant, Silas was upon him. It was not an attack, but a calculated, overwhelming force. A hand grabbed the front of his robes and he was slammed against the tunnel wall. The air exploded from his lungs, his head cracking against the stone. For a second, all he saw were stars in a darkness that had no stars. The first rule of pain, Silas's voice was in his ear, a calm, academic whisper, is that it is a signal, nothing more. It is information. Right now it is informing you of the structural weakness of your skull. It is not an emotion. It is not a moral judgment. It is data. Your panic, your fear of the pain is a secondary reaction, a useless story. Separate the sensation from the story. What is the pure sensation you are feeling right now, archivist? Kalen's head throbbed, a pulsing, nauseating rhythm. It hurts, he gasped. Useless, Silas said, and slammed his head against the wall again, harder this time. The world swam. That is the story. It hurts. A child's complaint. Be an archivist of your own body. Catalog the sensation. Is it sharp or dull? Is it hot or cold? Is it localized or spreading? Analyze it. Deconstruct it. Rob it of its power by refusing to give it a narrative. Through a haze of agony, Kalen tried. He focused past the overwhelming urge to scream or beg. He isolated the feeling in his head. It was a bright, sharp pressure at the point of impact, a radiating, hot pulse that moved in waves, a dull, heavy ache that was spreading down his neck. He was so focused on this internal cataloging that he almost didn't notice Silas step away. Pain is the ultimate teacher of presence, Silas continued from the darkness. It drags you kicking and screaming into the now. You cannot be worrying about yesterday's regrets or tomorrow's anxieties when your head is being introduced to a stone wall. Use it. When you feel pain, whether physical or emotional, let it be an anchor to the present moment. Observe it without judgment, and you will discover a space between the stimulus and your response. In that space lies your freedom. He was right. In that moment of pure analysis, Kalen's fear had momentarily vanished. He was no longer a terrified victim. He was a dispassionate observer of his own suffering. It was a bizarre, empowering sensation. The creatures ahead, Silas said, his voice returning to a normal volume. They will try to cause you pain. They will use your fear of it as a weapon. They will expect you to react like a child. You will not. You will receive the pain. You will accept the information it gives you. And then you will act not from a place of fear, but from a place of cold, clear purpose. Now take this. Something hard and wooden was pressed into Kalen's hand. It was a section of Silas's staff, broken off about the length of his forearm. It was heavy, solid, a weapon. You will take the one on the right, Silas commanded. I will handle the one on the left. Do not think about victory. Do not think about defeat. Think only of the next correct action. That is all. This is a lesson many of you need to learn. You are terrified of pain, not just physical pain, but the pain of rejection, of failure, of embarrassment, of discomfort. You have organized your entire life around the avoidance of this pain. You stay in the job you hate to avoid the pain of uncertainty. You stay in the relationship that is killing your soul to avoid the pain of being alone. You refuse to chase your dreams to avoid the pain of failure. Your fear of pain has built a prison for you. But what if, like Kaelin, you could learn to reframe it? What if pain was not a stop sign but a compass? What if physical pain in the gym was not suffering, but data telling you your muscles are growing? What if the emotional pain of a difficult conversation was not agony, but information, revealing a truth that needs to be addressed? If you can learn to observe your pain without judgment, to separate the raw sensation from the terrified story you tell about it, you will unlock a level of freedom and resilience you cannot currently imagine. You will become unstoppable, because the enemy's greatest weapon will have become your greatest tool. Kalen moved forward, his heart a cold, heavy lump in his chest. He could hear the scraping sounds more clearly now, accompanied by a wet, clicking noise. He gripped the wooden baton, his knuckles white. He was no longer Kalen the archivist. That man was a ghost, a story he used to tell himself. He was now just a collection of senses, moving toward a problem. His purpose was to deal with the creature on the right. The next correct action was to place his foot silently on the ground in front of him. Then the next and the next. He rounded the corner into the side chamber. It was dimly lit by phosphorescent moss clinging to the walls. The two creatures were there, hunched over the mangled corpse of a city guardsman. They were smaller than the one in the library, wiry and fast-looking. At the sound of Kalen's footfall, the one on the right snapped its head up. Its face was a cluster of milky, unblinking eyes. It hissed, a sound like steam escaping a cracked pipe, and launched itself at him. The training, if one could call the brutal lesson in the tunnel that took over. He saw the blur of motion, the glint of claws. He did not think. He did not feel fear. He simply processed the data. Trajectory, high. Speed, fast. Target, his throat. He acted. He dropped his weight, letting the creature's momentum carry it over his head. As it passed, he drove the pointed end of the baton upward into its soft underbelly. There was a sickening, wet crunch. The creature shrieked, a high, piercing sound that vibrated in his teeth and collapsed in a heap. He stood over it, breathing heavily, the baton still clenched in his hand. He had done it. On the other side of the small chamber, Silas stood with his staff planted on the neck of the second creature, which lay still and broken. Silas had not even seemed to break a sweat. He simply nodded, a curt, almost imperceptible gesture. You analyzed, you acted. You did not hesitate, Silas stated. The result is irrelevant. The process is everything. Remember that. Victory and defeat are imposters. There is only the clarity of right action. They continued their journey in silence for a time, a silence that felt different to Kaelin. It was not the empty, dusty silence of the library. It was a full silence, charged with presence and awareness. He was aware of every sound, every shift in the air, every tremor in the stone beneath his feet. He was no longer a passive observer of the world. He was an active participant in it. He was in the arena. Their path eventually led them to a vast, underground cavern. In the center of it was the sunken temple. It was a magnificent structure of black, volcanic rock, ancient beyond reckoning, and it pulsed with a faint, internal light. But between them and the temple lay a chasm hundreds of feet deep. The only way across was a bridge, a narrow, crumbling span of stone no wider than a man's shoulders. And guarding the bridge were more of the shadow creatures. Not 2 or 3, a dozen, at least. They were larger too, some bearing a crude, chitinous armor, and in their midst was one that was different. It was huge, almost twice the size of a man, and it seemed more solid, more real than the others. It didn't skitter. It stood, planted and powerful, like a dark knight. It held a long, crystalline blade that shimmered with a sickly, purple light. Kalen's blood ran cold. The progress he had made, the small flicker of confidence he had gained, was extinguished in an instant. This was impossible. This was a force no two men, let alone an old man and a novice, could overcome. "This is a test we cannot pass," Kalen said, his voice barely a whisper. Silas stood beside him, gazing at the scene with that same infuriating calm. "You are doing it again, archivist. You are seeing the obstacle. You are judging it impossible. You are writing the end of the story before the first page has even been turned. What if you are wrong?" "Look at them," Kalen insisted, his voice rising with a frantic edge. "Look at that thing. We are not heroes from your books. We are flesh and bone." "And what do you think they were?" Silas countered, turning his winter sky eyes on Kalen. "The heroes in your sagas. Do you think they were born without fear? Do you think they faced challenges they knew for certain they could overcome? No, a hero is not a man who is never afraid. A hero is a man who is afraid and who acts anyway. The courage is not in the absence of fear, but in the judgment that something else is more important than fear." He pointed his staff at the bridge. "Our purpose lies on the other side of that bridge. That is what is important. The fear you feel is just a cloud passing in front of the sun. It is not the sun itself. You must learn to act in spite of it. Not to conquer it, not to defeat it, but to simply let it be there and to take the next step anyway. This is the forge of true discipline. It is easy to be disciplined when you feel motivated, when you are confident, when the path is clear. But can you be disciplined when you are terrified, when you are filled with doubt, when every fiber of your being is screaming at you to run and hide? Can you still get out of bed at 5 a.m. when your mind is a storm of anxiety? Can you still make the sales call when you are certain you will be rejected? Can you still walk onto that stage when your knees are trembling? This is the separation of the man from the boy. The boy acts based on how he feels. The man acts based on what he has decided to do. His actions are not contingent on his emotional state. He has made a commitment to his purpose, to his principles, and he honors that commitment whether he feels like it or not. This is not about being emotionless. It is about not letting your emotions be the master of your will. Silas turned to Kalen, his expression serious. "There is one more lesson you must learn before we cross this bridge, the most difficult one. It is the lesson of acceptance. You must accept in the very core of your being that you might die here. You might fail. All our efforts might be for nothing." Kalen recoiled as if struck. "How can you say that? How can that possibly help?" "Because your fear of death, your fear of failure, is what makes you hesitant," Silas explained patiently. "It makes you weak. You fight to preserve yourself, to protect your precious life. But your life is not entirely yours to control. The shadow creatures, the crumbling bridge, 1,000 other variables are not in your power. The only thing you truly control is the honor and integrity with which you act in this moment. So you must release your attachment to the outcome. You must, as the old Stoics said, love your fate, amor fati. You must not just accept what happens, you must embrace it. If we die on this bridge, then we will die on this bridge fighting for our purpose. It is a good death, a meaningful death. And once you have truly accepted that, once you have made peace with the worst possible outcome, you are free. Fear has no more power over you. You can act with total commitment, with total freedom, because you have nothing left to lose. Think about this in your own life. The project at work you are so afraid of failing, the business you are terrified of launching, the relationship you are scared of committing to. Your fear is rooted in a desired outcome. You want success. You want profit. You want happiness. and you are terrified of not getting it. But what if you release that attachment? What if you focused entirely on the process? What if you said to yourself, I will pour every ounce of my effort, my integrity, and my skill into this project. I will do the work so well that I can be proud of it regardless of the outcome. If it succeeds, good. If it fails, good. I will have learned, I will have grown, and I will have acted with honor. This is not pessimism. It is the ultimate liberation. When you no longer fear the storm, you can learn to sail it. When you make peace with death, you can finally, truly begin to live. Kalen looked at the bridge, at the horde of monsters, at the dark night standing like a sentinel of doom. He took a deep breath. He thought of his old life, the quiet, safe, meaningless existence in the library. He would have died there eventually of old age and regret, his story unwritten. He looked at the impossible task before him. He might die here, yes, but it would be as a man who was trying to save the world. It would be a death with a purpose. He made a choice. He accepted it. He embraced it. And a profound calm, colder and deeper than any he had ever known, settled over him. The fear was still there, a faint tremor in his hands, but it was no longer his master. It was just a passenger. I am ready, Kalen said, and for the first time his voice did not sound like that of an archivist. It sounded like the voice of a guardian. Good, Silas said. He broke his own staff over his knee, handing the larger, heavier piece to Kalen. He kept only a short, sharpened shard for himself. Let us go write the next chapter. They stepped onto the bridge together. The charge of the first wave was a screeching, chaotic mess. Kalen and Silas stood back to back in the center of the narrow bridge, a tiny island of resolve in a sea of malice. Kalen remembered Silas's words, focus only on the next correct action. A creature lunged at him from the right. Correct action, block with the staff. Another from the left. Correct action, pivot and strike its leg. There was no time for fear, no space for doubt. There was only the brutal, rhythmic calculus of combat. Block, strike, pivot, block, strike, pivot. He was not a warrior. He was an archivist, but an archivist's mind is trained for patterns, for order in chaos. And combat, he was discovering, was a form of brutal pattern recognition. He began to see the tells, the subtle shifts in a creature's posture before it attacked, the openings in its guard, the rhythm of its aggression. He was not strong. He was not fast, but he could think. He could analyze. He used their own momentum against them, deflecting their lunges so they stumbled into the path of their fellows, or, with a well-timed shove, sent them plummeting into the chasm below. Beside him, Silas was a whirlwind of deadly grace. He moved less than Kalen, but his every action was devastatingly effective. A jab with his sharpened stick to an eye, a precise kick to a joint, a quick shove that sent two creatures screaming into the abyss. He was the anchor, the unmovable center around which Kalen's frantic defense revolved. They were holding. They were actually holding. A new feeling began to rise in Kalen, something he had only ever read about, exultation. The thrill of meeting a challenge and not breaking. The fierce, burning joy of discovering a strength you never knew you possessed. This is what lies on the other side of your fear. You think that comfort and safety are the goals. You think that an easy life is a good life. But the human soul does not thrive in calm waters. It withers. It stagnates. The soul craves resistance. It craves the whetstone. It needs the fire of the forge. The moments of greatest suffering, of greatest challenge, are the moments of greatest growth. The profound satisfaction you feel after a grueling workout, the pride you feel after completing a project that pushed you to your limits, the bond you form with comrades who went through hell with you, these are the experiences that give life its savor, its meaning. You are avoiding the very thing that will make you feel most alive. Stop running from the struggle. Start seeking it. See every challenge not as a threat, but as an opportunity to test yourself, to forge your will, to discover the person you are capable of becoming. But as the first wave of smaller creatures thinned, the Dark Knight, the massive creature with the crystalline blade, began to move. It strode onto the bridge, its heavy footfalls shaking the ancient stone. The remaining lesser creatures scurried back, giving it a wide berth. Its presence was a suffocating blanket of dread. It stopped 10 feet from them, its featureless face fixed on Sela's. It seemed to ignore Kalen completely. "This one is mine," Silas said, his voice low. "Your fight is with the others. Keep them off my back. No matter what happens, do not interfere. Do you understand?" But Kalen started to protest. "Do you understand?" Silas repeated, his voice like cracking stone. "I understand," Kalen said, his throat dry. The Dark Knight raised its crystalline sword. It did not shriek or hiss. It was utterly silent. It moved forward, not with a charge, but with the inexorable pace of an executioner. Silas met it, his sharpened stick looking like a toothpick against the creature's massive blade. What followed was not a fight, it was a masterclass. The creature was all power, its blade carving huge, glowing arcs in the air that could have split boulders. Silas was all evasion and redirection. He was a leaf in the wind, a shadow, a ghost. He flowed around the creature's brutal attacks, his movements so fluid they seemed to defy physics. He was not trying to win. He was trying to teach. Even in a battle for his life, his focus was on Kalen's education. With every move, he was demonstrating a principle. The principle of using an opponent's strength against them. The principle of yielding to overwhelming force and striking only when an opening appears. The principle of absolute control over one's own energy and motion. The lesser creatures, emboldened by their champion, began to creep forward again. Kalen's battle resumed. He fought with a new ferocity, a desperate need to honor Silas's command. He had to hold the line. He had to protect his mentor. He put everything he had learned into practice. He observed without judgment. He acted with purpose. He accepted the pain of a claw scraping his arm, using it as an anchor to the present moment. He was no longer just surviving. He was guarding. The fight between Silas and the Dark Knight was a blur. Silas was a master, but the creature was a demigod of destruction. Its power was relentless. For every 10 of its attacks, Silas could make only one small, probing jab at its armor. He was tiring. His movements, once impossibly fluid, were becoming a fraction of a second slower. And on a bridge against a foe like this, a fraction of a second was an eternity. The inevitable happened. Silas evaded a downward slash, but the creature followed with a sweep of its blade that was too fast. The crystal edge caught Silas across the chest, not a deep cut, but enough to throw him off balance. He stumbled back. For the first time, the old man's perfect calm was broken by a gasp of pain. The Dark Knight raised its sword for the final, killing blow. No, the cry was ripped from Kalen's soul. He broke his promise. He abandoned his post. He charged. He knew it was suicide. He knew he was nothing compared to this thing. But he also knew he could not stand by and watch his mentor die. In that moment, something was more important than fear. Something was more important than his own life. He drove his heavy staff like a spear at the creature's unarmored side. It was like striking a mountain. The impact shuddered up his arms, but it did the one thing he needed it to do. It made the creature turn. It diverted the killing blow meant for Silas. The Dark Knight, annoyed at this gnat-like interruption, backhanded him. The force was incredible. Kalen felt his ribs crack as he was sent flying, tumbling across the stone bridge to land in a heap near the far side. His staff clattered away into the darkness of the chasm. He was broken, helpless. The creature turned back to Silas, who was struggling to get to his feet. The moment of opportunity was gone. Silas was vulnerable. The end had come. This is the final and perhaps greatest test of the will. The moment of utter, undeniable failure. The moment when you have given everything you have and it was not enough. The moment your plan has shattered, your strength has failed, and your last hope is extinguished. What do you do then? Do you surrender to despair? Do you curse the fates? Or do you find in the ashes of your defeat one final ember of resolve? The world tells you that failure is the end. But the Guardian's resolve teaches that failure is not an outcome. It is a data point. It is a lesson. It is the fire that burns away your arrogance and your illusions, leaving only the hard, unvarnished truth of your limits. And it is only when you know your limits that you can begin to truly transcend them. Lying on the cold stone, his body screaming in agony, Kalen watched as the dark night raised its sword over Sila's. He had failed. He had broken his promise, and for nothing. He had only delayed the inevitable by a few seconds. Despair, thick and suffocating, washed over him. It was a familiar feeling. It was the feeling of the library, the feeling of being a helpless observer, a footnote. But then he heard Silas's voice in his mind, as clear as if he were standing beside him. The result is irrelevant. The process is everything. There is only the clarity of right action. What was the right action now? He was disarmed. His body was broken. He could not fight. He could not stand. But he could still think. He could still observe. He looked past the two figures on the bridge, his eyes scanning the structure of the temple on the other side. His archivist's mind, a repository of engineering, history, and forgotten lore, began to work. He saw the keystone at the apex of the temple's entrance arch. He saw the stress lines in the ancient rock of the bridge, lines he had learned to read from old architectural scrolls. He saw how the bridge was anchored, not to the cliff face, but directly to the temple's foundation. The bridge and the temple were one structure. An insane, desperate idea bloomed in his mind. A final, correct action. He looked around him, his eyes searching for a tool. He saw it. A single, loose cobblestone near his hand, dislodged by the force of his landing. It was small. It was pathetic. It was a prayer against a hurricane. He grabbed it. With a scream that was equal parts pain and pure, undiluted will, he dragged himself to his feet. He could not stand straight. He was a broken puppet. But he was standing. He caught the eye of the dark night. The creature had paused, its sword held high, as if intrigued by this final, pitiful act of defiance. Kalen held up the cobblestone. "You have taken my city," he roared, his voice raw. "You have taken my home. You have taken my past." He looked at Silas, who was now watching him, a strange, unreadable expression on his face. "But you will not take our future." He threw the cobblestone. It was not aimed at the creature. It was aimed at the keystone above the temple entrance. The throw was weak, clumsy, an archivist's throw, but it was true. The small stone sailed through the air, a tiny speck of defiance, and struck the ancient keystone with a pathetic clink. For a moment nothing happened. The creature seemed to almost laugh, a silent, contemptuous gesture. Then a deep groan echoed from the temple, a sound of stone in agony. A crack, thin as a spider's thread, appeared in the keystone. It spread, racing down the archway, down the foundations. The groan became a roar. The bridge, the very structure they were standing on, began to shudder violently. The dark night, for the first time, showed a sign of alarm. It forgot Silas. It forgot Kalen. It turned to flee back the way it had come. It was too late. With a final, catastrophic shriek of tearing rock, the temple's archway collapsed, and the bridge, its anchor point destroyed, ripped away from the cliff face. Kalen, already on the far side, scrambled onto the safety of the temple platform. He turned just in time to see the entire span of the bridge, and the horde of shadow creatures upon it, including the dark night, plunge into the infinite darkness of the chasm below. On the other side, on the cliff edge from which they had started, stood Silas. He had not tried to cross. He simply stood there watching. The chasm between them was now 100 feet of empty air. Silas looked at Kalen, his student, the boy he had dragged from the ashes. He raised his hand, not in a wave, but in a gesture of acknowledgement, a salute. Then he turned and walked away, disappearing back into the smoke and ruin of the dead city. He had brought Kalen to the temple. His purpose was fulfilled. The rest of the journey was Kalen's to walk alone. Kalen stood there for a long time, his broken body screaming, his mind a quiet, empty space. He had done it. He had survived. He had become something new. He turned and looked at the entrance to the sunken temple. His purpose was inside. He did not know what he would find. He did not know if he could seal the breach. He did not know if he would survive the day. But it didn't matter. He knew who he was. He was not a victim. He was not an observer. He was a guardian, and he had work to do. He took a painful, halting step forward, and then another, disappearing into the shadows of the temple, his resolve forged in fire, his path illuminated by the harsh, beautiful light of a purpose he had chosen for himself. The story of Kalen is not just a story. It is a mirror. His library is your comfort zone. The shadow creatures are your doubts, your fears, your inner demons. Silas is the mentor you have been waiting for, the voice of hard truth you have been avoiding. And the sunken temple is your purpose, the great work you were put on this earth to do. You have lived as the archivist for too long. You have studied the maps but have refused to take the journey. You have read the stories of great men and women, believing that their courage was something you yourself did not possess. You have been waiting for the right moment, waiting for the fear to go away, waiting for someone to come and give you permission to become the person you were meant to be. The breach is open in your life. The chaos is pouring in. Your old world is already burning. Stop clinging to the ashes. See the destruction for what it is, a gift, an opportunity, the chance to finally, truly begin. This is your call to action, not tomorrow, not next week, now. First, you must break the first seal, the forging of perception. Identify the biggest problem in your life right now, the one that causes you the most suffering. Now separate the event from your judgment. Write down the objective facts of the situation. Then write down the story you have been telling yourself about those facts. See the difference. The power is not in the event. It is in the story. Choose to write a more empowering story. A story not of victimhood but of opportunity. A story of a challenge, not a catastrophe. Second, you must define your purpose. Find your sunken temple. What is the single most important thing you want to achieve? What is the purpose that will give meaning to your struggle? It must be something that both inspires you and terrifies you. Write it down. Make it real. Let it become the North Star by which you navigate the chaos of your life. Every decision you make from this day forward should be measured against this purpose. Does this action move me closer to the temple or further away? Third, you must learn to use your pain, anchor yourself to the now. The next time you feel pain, physical or emotional, do not run from it. Do not distract yourself. Stop, breathe, and observe it without judgment. Analyze it, deconstruct it. Use it as a tool to pull you into the present moment. Find the space between the stimulus and your conditioned response. In that space, choose a new response, one that is aligned with your purpose, not your fear. Fourth, you must embrace your fate, make peace with failure. Look at your greatest fear, the worst-case scenario. Truly visualize it, accept it. Make peace with the possibility that it might happen. Understand that you can act with honor, with integrity, with total commitment, and still fail. Release your desperate attachment to the outcome. When you no longer fear the abyss, you can walk the narrow bridge with a steady heart. This is not a path of comfort. This is a path of fire and steel. It will require everything you have. It will break you down and remake you. The old you, the archivist of your own potential, must die, so that the guardian within you can be born. The world does not need any more critics, any more observers, any more librarians of lost potential. It needs guardians, It needs men and women who are willing to stand on the bridge, to face the darkness, and to hold the line. It needs you. So what will you choose? Will you remain in the smoking ruins of your old life, a victim of circumstance, a footnote in a story someone else wrote? Or will you pick up your staff, your broken piece of will, and take the first step toward the temple? The path is hard. The enemy is legion. The outcome is not guaranteed, but the purpose is true. Join this community of modern guardians. Share your own story of resolve in the comments below. What is the sun-drenched temple you are fighting towards? Let us forge our discipline together in the shadows so we may stand as protectors in the light. Your education has just begun. We will be waiting for you on the other side of the bridge. Walk the path.